He says crime and incarceration rates for African Americans are 7 times those of white America. Which seems to me, if you quote a statistic like that, if you say incarceration and crime levels, black 7 times those of white, you come to one of 2 conclusions. One, something happened before the era we live in to make one group of people 7 times more likely to commit crimes, or that other group is just morally inferior.
What follows is a summary of the past decade or so of research pertaining to the genetics of racial differences in aberrant or delinquent violence. MAOA is an enzyme that deaminates, thereby inactivating, biogenic amines like the neurotransmitters, norepinephrine and serotonin. The gene MAOA on the X chromosome encodes the MAOA enzyme. Variation in this gene has been associated with alcoholism, bipolar disorder, panic disorder, and obsessive-compulsive disorder. A variable number of tandem repeats, VNTR, in the genetic promoter sequence determines the gene's activity. The 2 most common alleles of VNTR are VNTR1, which stands for 3 promoter repeats or 3R, and VNTR3, which stands for 4 repeats or 4R. Brain monoamine oxidase A activity predicts trait aggression. This study linked the amount of MAOA enzyme that the MAOA gene expresses to violent attitudes, and mapped MAOA activity by brain region. The MPQ aggression scale measures attitudes, values, and beliefs that are consistent with approval of the use of physical violence. Longitudinal research shows that the MPQ aggression scale empirically predicts future conviction for violent crimes such as physical assault. Here we report for the first time that the lower the MAOA activity in cortical and subcortical brain regions, the higher the self-reported aggression, contributing to more than 1/3 of the variability among a sample of 27 healthy men. Role of genotype in the cycle of violence in maltreated children. A study of 442 white males in New Zealand. For adult violent conviction, maltreated males with the low MAOA activity genotype were more likely than non-maltreated males with this genotype to be convicted of a violent crime by a significant odds ratio of 9.8. In contrast, among males with high MAOA activity, maltreatment did not confer significant risk for violent conviction. Low MAOA activity was defined as 3 repeats or 5 repeats. High MAOA activity was defined as 3.5 repeats or 4 repeats. Although individuals having the combination of low activity MAOA genotype and maltreatment were only 12% of the male birth cohort, they accounted for 44% of the cohort's violent convictions, yielding an attributable risk fraction, 11%, comparable to that of the major risk factors associated with cardiovascular disease. Moreover, 85% of cohort males having a low activity MAOA genotype who were severely maltreated developed some form of antisocial behavior. A functional polymorphism in the monoamine oxidase A gene promoter. This early study of 1,448 subjects taken from 3 previous unrelated studies established that alleles with 3.5 or 4 copies of the repeat sequence are transcribed 2 to 10 times more efficiently than those with 3 or 5 copies, and found significant ethnic/racial variations in MAOA, UVNTR allele frequencies. Women have 2 X chromosomes, giving this study 2,156 total X chromosomes to analyze. The study made no mention of the existence of a 2 repeat allele. Here are the allele frequencies by race/ethnicity. 64.8% of alleles in non-Hispanic whites have 4 repeats. About 60% of alleles in Asians and blacks have 3 repeats.
The one thing you can always count on is white America's fear of the black man.
We've heard the stories on the news and in the papers, and they have killed people. Killer bees, also known as Africanized bees.
I'm scared. I'm really worried with them.
Rosemary Shibley never expected a nest of Africanized killer bees to shack up across the street from her.
But I'm terribly allergic to them, and so are my grandkids.
They're originally from southern and eastern Africa. Dr. Warwick Kerr brought some to Brazil in 1956 and tried to mate them with the European bee, the kind that we're used to. But they got loose, took over, and moved all the way to the southern United States. The main difference between a traditional honeybee and an Africanized bee is the bee's aggressiveness. If I was to do this to an Africanized bee's hive, I could have several hundred stings in a matter of minutes. Danny Self raises the kinder, gentler European bees, and he's done the research.
The only way that you can tell the two of them is doing measurements on the body parts.
Quite frankly, the black community has become entertainment for the rest of the community.
Meaning what?
The entertainment being that the crime of the day, if it bleeds, it leads, gets to be the front story, and then that becomes the perception and the image of an entire people, which couldn't be further from the truth, in my opinion.
The VNTR to repeat in MAOA and delinquent behavior in adolescence and young adulthood, associations, and MAOA promoter activity. A study of 2,524 people from the AdHealth subsample of the National Longitudinal Study of Adolescent Health. 11 of the men possess a 2R allele. 31 of the women possess 1 or 2 2R alleles. The study adjusted regression analysis for self-reported race and ethnicity. For men, the genetic variants on the single X chromosome are grouped into 3 categories, based on Sabel and others: 2R, 3R or 5R, and 3.5R or 4R. The delinquency score for 2R tends to be twice as high as those in the other 2 genotype categories. The female participants were classified into 3 genotype categories. Any 2R, those with only 3R or 5R, and those with 3.5R or 4R. For women in Table 2, the 2R stands out, being associated with much higher scores for both serious and violent delinquency at waves 2 and 3. In the functional analysis, the 2 repeat exhibited the lowest level of promoter activity, that is, 25 to 30% of the promoter activity exhibited by the 4 repeat. The level of promoter activity for the 3 repeat is located between the 2 and 4 repeats. Although the promoter activity differs significantly between 3R and 4R, we did not find a significant difference in serious and violent delinquency between those possessing 3R and those possessing 4R. This result is not inconsistent with the findings reported by Caspi and others, who found a higher level of violent behavior for 3R and 5R than 4R and 3.5R only among men who were maltreated in childhood. Kim Cohen and others reported a main effect of 3R against 4R as well as an interaction effect in a sample of 7-year-old Caucasian boys born in England and Wales. The association of DNA sequence variation at the MAOA genetic locus with quantitative behavioral traits in normal males. This study of 421 adult men differed from most previous research, in that it studied unrelated volunteers without inclusion criteria, such as with the populations of 125 smokers and 746 people with gay siblings included in the study by Sabel and others. This study determined prevalences of 3 repeats of the VNTR promoter, 4 repeats, and the more rare alleles. 5 of the 37 African Americans, or 13.5%. Possessed rare MAOA, VNTR alleles, compared to 6 of the 274 Caucasians, or 2.19%. And compared to 0 of both populations of 28 Asian Americans and 24 Hispanic Americans. The association between VNTR diversity and MAOA haplotype diversity corroborates this finding. Haplotypes are sets of single nucleotide polymorphisms that are statistically associated. The Fisher exact test for the association between the above noted VNTR alleles and the SNP haplotypes was strongly positive. Greater than 86% of the individuals in the Caucasian population carried one of the 2 most prevalent haplotypes. The haplotype diversity is quite low also for the Asian Americans. By contrast, the haplotype diversity for the African American population was much greater, and there were 7 intermediate frequency haplotypes and 6 rare haplotypes. This finding is consistent with the mostly out of Africa origin of modern humans and/or the role of European African admixture in the origin of African American populations.